Raspberry Pi's new Compute Model 3 Plus is 10 times faster, still just as cheap. Plus, Olive, it's a new video editor, an open source video editor aiming to take on the pros like Final Cut Pro. Also in the news, Facebook's research tool pays users to get complete access to their data. Now you can buy a Chromebook with a 15.6-inch 4K display, if that's something you want to do. Also, we have some app news. 2 big releases, Awesome 4.3 and Flatpak 1.2 are out, plus the GTK app Gradio is dead. Long live shortwave. These are 5 stories that I will be taking into account. And the first story on the docket tonight is Raspberry Pi just released their new Compute Module 3 Plus, which is 10 times faster than the original Compute, still just as cheap. This article comes from Joey Snedden over at OMG Ubuntu, and as always, I'm going to link to all the articles discussed on the show today in the show description. So, the Raspberry Pi Foundation just recently announced that they're going to be releasing a Raspberry Pi Compute Module 3 Plus, simply known as CM3 Plus, for those that just want to abbreviate everything. So this, of course, was going to be the smallest, nimblest, most versatile Raspberry Pi board ever, right? According to the Raspberry Pi Foundation, it will be a more powerful Pi board, still just as cheap. Reading a little bit from the article, quote, "The Raspberry Pi compute modules are designed for use in embedded, industrial, and small devices rather than the retro arcade machines, personal clouds, and bijou desktop PCs that the bigger Raspberry Pis are more often used in." So we're talking, the small form factor Pi here. Joey has a picture of let's see, it's the size of a SO-DIMM RAM. So that is, I guess, the new Compute Module 3 Plus board here, and you can see it looks no bigger than your standard stick of RAM. So small board, available in 4 distinct versions. Pricing starts at $25, so still very competitive pricing, still the cheapest thing going. So big advantages with the new CM3 Plus is, of course, better performance, 10 times faster than the original Compute, thermal behavior, so better thermals. A quote from James Adam, the COO of the Raspberry Pi Foundation. He quotes, "This newest version of our flexible board for industrial applications offers over 10 times the ARM performance, twice the RAM capacity, and up to 8 times the flash capacity of the original Compute module. Our aim for the Compute module was to deliver the core Raspberry Pi technology in a form factor that allowed others to incorporate it into their own products cheaply and easily." So pricing again is going to start at $25, but again, they're going to have 4 distinct versions available. The step up from the base $25 model is the $30 model for the 8GB eMMC storage, $35 for 16GB eMMC storage, and then a $40 version that is 32GB of eMMC storage. So very reasonably priced. Of course, the Compute Module I/O board is also available for those looking to repurpose their Compute module into something more flexible, with the board offering HDMI, USB, DisplayPort. So what they're talking about here, the Compute Module I/O board, is something more like this. So for those of you that are not watching the video, this is what you expect for a Raspberry Pi kit, right? This is an actual bigger board. It's got USB port, HDMI port. For those of you that are familiar with buying like the Cana kit Raspberry Pis or something, so they're going to have that Module I/O board version 3 out as well. Now that they're serving up this latest piece, this fresh slice of pie, the Pi Foundation has stated that they no longer recommend its existing CM1, CM3, and CM3 Lite products for new designs. Instead, they want everybody focusing on CM3 Plus, which is now on sale, so it's the recommended module for new industrial designs going forward. They say this new module will be in production from now and will be on sale until January 2026. So at least for the next 8 years, 9 years, what is that? 7 years. So you've got till 2026, I guess, before they're going to make CM3 Plus obsolete and maybe come out with the next version of the Pi. Anyway, big news. I know a lot of you guys love the Raspberry Pi. I own a Pi. I haven't played that much with it, but they are really neat devices. You can do some amazing things with these devices that are just insanely cheap. And the second story on the docket tonight is about Olive. What is Olive? Olive is a new open source video editor aiming to take on the big boys like Final Cut Pro. So this article is from itsfalse.com. Quote, Olive is a new open source video editor under development. This non-linear video editor aims to provide a free alternative to high-end professional video editing software. Too high an aim? I think so, end quote. So Olive is brand new on the scenes, but the goal of the developers is to make Olive a free and open source video editor that can take on professional video editing software. Things like Final Cut Pro, for example, for those Mac users that use such proprietary garbage. Just kidding, guys. Or DaVinci Resolve is a great Lightworks, another professional video editor. So Olive is aiming to take on those sorts of projects rather than, I guess, taking on, what it sees maybe as the lesser open source video editor crowd, things like Kdenlive and Shotcut, etc. Now, Kdenlive and Shotcut are great video editors. I use Kdenlive. I recommend Kdenlive because, again, it's free and open source, where really the professional grade video editors, things like Lightworks and DaVinci and Final Cut Pro, of course, they're not free. They're not open source. So I like to use free software where I can. I like to support the movement, and Kdenlive is fine. It meets all of my needs. It's probably going to meet most people's needs as far as a good video editor. But what we're talking about here is, again, what the author is calling a professional grade video editor, and Olive wants to be the first free and open source professional grade video editor, again, to compete with the likes of Final Cut Pro. I'm not sure how this is going to pan out. Again, this is pretty much alpha software at this point. You guys want to install it. There are ways to install it in Ubuntu via PPA. You can also install it via a snap pack, regardless of whatever distribution you're on. Snaps are kind of distro agnostic. Flatpak, there's a Flatpak available for it too if you prefer a Flatpak. There's also an app image for those of you that love app images. I actually use snaps, Flatpaks, and app images, all three on my system. I run Manjaro. I've got no problem with either format. So if you guys have a preference, you can pretty much get Olive on your system. If you want to support the development of the Olive video editor, they're looking for people to help them. This is a massive undertaking. So if you're a programmer and this might be something you want to contribute to, go over to their GitHub page and see what you can do. Put your coding skills to the test and help build the next great video editor. The It's False article mentions a review of Olive on Libre Graphics World, so I will also link to that article in the description. So this guy over at Libre Graphics World had a pretty good review of Olive. He tried it out, and he discussed the good, the bad, and the ugly, basically. Again, it's alpha software. I'll skip the good. Let's go straight to the bad and the ugly for those of you that want to try it out. The bad, he mentions, the program does crash. He tried it out for about 8 hours, and he experienced 4 or 5 crashes. That's a lot. I would say that's really more ugly than bad, but it's alpha software. You can't trash alpha or beta software for having bugs. I mean, they put it out there for people to test. So now the ugly stuff is really more about features that are missing. I'll tell you one right now that jumps out at me: thumbnails for video clips. What he's talking about here is when you're clipping 2 images together or 2 videos together, it's nice to have a thumbnail at the beginning of each video clip so you know exactly what the clip is. Because many times when you're recording these videos on a camera or whatever through OBS, a lot of times all they have is maybe a timestamp. They're not named in anything descriptive. So you really have no idea. If you got 50 video clips, you have no idea what they all are. But when you start putting them, like in Kdenlive, for example, I have a thumbnail there, so I can see exactly what video clip is what here. But in, I guess, Olive, they haven't added that kind of functionality yet, so that would be kind of a big deal for somebody like me. Either that, or you got to start naming all your files something descriptive to help you out. Anyway, that's Olive. It's going to be the next big thing as far as open source video editor, maybe. Do I think it will succeed? I doubt it. Quite frankly, we have other open source video editors out there that are so far ahead of Olive. I mean, you're just getting started. Your alpha software, I don't want to say fragmentation, but fragmentation, right? You couldn't help, like the Kdenlive guys, make Kdenlive better. Kdenlive is almost there. Kdenlive's pretty good. Or even the guys working on something like Shotcut. Or I don't think we need another video editor, free and open source video editor. There's a dozen out there right now. Just my take on that. And the next story on the docket is Facebook's new research tool pays users to get complete access to their data. So, another scary story about Facebook. This story comes from False Bytes, and there was an update to the original story. When I read it yesterday, this update wasn't here, but I'll get back to the update. First, let's talk about the original story. Quote, last year in March, it was reported that Facebook pushed its Onavo Protect VPN app to the iOS users. While VPNs are usually used as an extra privacy layer, this tool did the exact opposite. It tracked the user's activity, collected their data. Later, Apple kicked off the app from the App Store as it was violating the company's terms and conditions. So, fast forward, to now. Facebook basically is doing the same thing again. They're using this new tactic to basically get user data from folks on iOS devices, for example. The company is paying users from ages 13 to 35 up to $20 to install this app of theirs. In case minors end up signing up for the app, they are prompted to ask for parental permission. So if you're one of these 13-year-olds that they pay $20 to install the app to get their personal information, they do ask the 13-year-olds, please get mom and dad's permission before you do this. Facebook says that there are, quote, no risk, unquote, involved with this data collection project of theirs, that one should acknowledge that, quote, the project involves tracking of personal information via your child's use of app. So for the minors that sign up, the children, don't worry, there's no risk. All we're doing is tracking their personal information via how they're using their apps. So what exactly is this research tool doing? Well, it grants Facebook full access to your smartphone and all of your web activity. So they know exactly what programs you're using on your phone. They know what you're doing on the web. So how did Facebook get this thing even into the App Store on the iPhone? Because Apple has kicked this stuff off of their store before. They don't like the kind of shenanigans that Facebook does here. Well, to protect themselves from the wrath of Apple's policy, quote, Facebook has been using third-party beta testing services named Utest, Applause, and BetaBound. So they kind of snuck in the back door, basically. Well, these beta services, what they're doing, they're running ads on Snapchat and Instagram for paid social media research study. Facebook has acknowledged that, yes, this data collection program is going on, and they have no plans to stop it. This is just who Facebook is, right? So back to the update at the top of the article. After the report surfaced, Facebook said it would shut down the iOS version of its research app. However, Apple says it's already blocked Facebook's app because it violates Apple's policies. This kind of app is against Apple's terms of service, so they've already removed the Facebook apps from their store. But Facebook said it would go ahead and shut down the iOS version anyway because they knew that what they were doing was really against Apple policy anyway. They were trying to be clever again and sneak into the App Store, but it looks like they can't get their stuff on iOS. They might just have to just stick to Android. And the fourth story on the docket tonight is about Chromebooks. There is a Chromebook on the market right now that you can buy with a 15.6-inch 4K display if that's something you want to do. And I say if that's something you want to do because I know there are going to be people watching this and listening to this that are going to go, dear God, why? Why a Chromebook with a 4K display, right? This article comes from Liliputing. This article was written by Brad Linder. He writes, quote, Lenovo's Yoga Chromebook C630 is a convertible laptop with a 15.6-inch touchscreen display, a 360-degree hinge, and pretty beefy specs by Chromebook standards. So what are those beefy specs? 8 gigs of RAM, 64 gigs of storage, an Intel i3 processor. Higher price models will have upgrades up to 128 gigs of storage and a Core i5 chip. So that is pretty beefy by Chromebook standards. When Lenovo first announced this laptop last year, they said, hey, it's going to come with 4K display. There will be a model with a 4K display. So far, the only models available for purchase at this time are 1080p screens, but it looks like that's about to change, or it's already changed. Lenovo has started selling a 4K version. Let me actually click on the site, uBlock Origin. Come on, let me get my ad block on. I never use ad block. I don't mind ads. I know people make a living with ads on their websites. I always turn ad block on, though, for purposes of this show, because it would make a pretty poor video if I was constantly being bombarded with ads. Anyway, the Lenovo Yoga Chromebook 2-in-1, starting price $719.99. That's not a bad price. Again, 15.6-inch display, up to 4K resolution. I doubt this is the 4K model. So $719.99 was for the 1080p screen. $899.99 it looks like. Yoga Chromebook Midnight Blue, 3840 by 2160 display. So there you go. That's still not a bad price. That's a pretty decent. I mean, that's nearly $1,000 for a Chromebook. Again, I know some people are gonna. Why would you do that? These are such underpowered machines anyway, and why would you need 4K display on something like a Chromebook? You're not going to be doing anything fancy. You're not going to, be using, serious graphics programs, video editing, and things like that. Well, not right now on Chromebooks, but in the future. These Chromebooks keep getting more and more powerful. They keep beefing up the specs a little bit. Pretty soon, you're going to be able to do serious work on Chromebooks. You may even be able to do things like gaming on Chromebook, for example. Now, for somebody like me, would I spend $900+ on a Chromebook with a 15.6-inch 4K display? Probably not. I think I wouldn't mind buying a Chromebook with a 15.6-inch display, but probably 1080p is fine. I'd just buy the $700 model. Why spend a couple of $100 more for the 4K display? I'm not sure it's really worth it, at least not yet, but I don't hate it. And the fifth and final story on the docket tonight is there are two big app releases that I wanted to discuss. Awesome 4.3 is out, and Flatpak 1.2 is out. Also, the popular GTK radio streaming app Gradio. I actually did a video a while back on Gradio on the YouTube channel. Gradio is dead. But don't worry, Gradio is going to be reborn again as something new. We're going to discuss that here in just a second. But first, let's talk about the app releases. So, the Awesome Window Manager just saw a new release, version 4.3. So, Awesome version 4.3 is the third release of the 4.x API. So, it comes after 1.5 years of little fixes and improvements. Awesome Window Manager doesn't see that many big updates because it's pretty feature complete. It's a tiling window manager. It's been around forever. This is a good thing. It means Awesome Window Manager is pretty stable. Things are not likely to break on you. As far as new features, it actually has a pretty long list of new features, but not the sort of thing most people would be interested in, unless, of course, you're into tiling window managers and you like the Lua programming language. But anyway, I will link to the release announcement. It is very lengthy. You kind of have to be a geek to understand a lot of this, but a lot of this involves new improvements to how it does widgets, like the Lua widgets and stuff within Awesome. Pretty neat stuff. Nothing earth-shattering. Again, if you just a normal Awesome Window Manager user and you don't really hack on the thing that much, you probably won't see too many changes. Flatpak 1.2 is also out. Flatpak 1.0 was released 4 months ago, so 4 months later we have Flatpak 1.2. What's changed? Well, looks like we're going to have a better command line controls. So a better command line user experience. So it looks like they've given us some new command line commands here. So Flatpak space PS. I'm assuming to view processes. Yes. So if we need to kill a process, we could run Flatpak PS to view a process, and we can run Flatpak space kill to kill a Flatpak process that's running. That is actually really neat. Now, that is a very useful feature. Looks like we're going to have some better logging in Flatpak. For those of you using a traditional graphical desktop, on the desktop side of things, GNOME settings and the GNOME Software Center will show Flatpak permissions in more detail in upcoming releases. So, a nice little release for Flatpak 1.2. And of course, I mentioned Gradio, popular radio streaming app Gradio. Really good program. Gradio is dead. Don't worry, Gradio will be back, but it will be born again, and it's going to be born again under the new name Shortwave. So Gradio is, the main dev of Gradio is a guy who calls himself Felix Hacker. And I guess he is a member of the GNOME Foundation. This is a GNOME app, Gradio. And what he's doing is he's deciding to let Gradio, as it exists now, die. Gonna basically just recreate this app from the ground up using Rust, and he, of course, will rename the app from Gradio to Shortwave. So the app will live on, probably will be even better going forward as he rebuilds it from the ground up in Rust. The only thing I hate about this is, Felix, you really need to reconsider the name. Gradio was a fantastic name. For branding purposes, Gradio's awesome. Shortwave sucks. I gotta be honest, guy. So if any of you guys know Felix, talk some sense into him. Keep the Gradio name. Shortwave, not a great name. I'm sorry, guy. Shortwave. Shortwave's about as bad a name as dead beef. Alright, that was the fifth and final story on the docket tonight. This was Taking Into Account episode 27. I release a new episode of Taking Into Account every Thursday, so look for Taking Into Account episode 28 sometime next Thursday. As always, I like to end these shows reading a viewer question or comment. So I got this email yesterday from one of my viewers, and quote, I use pure Arch, and I am pretty good with command line interface as far as general commands. I also use the search engine a lot to solve my problems, or I use the Arch wiki. What I'm looking for is a couple of places to go find news on the Linux community and Arch. I've already subscribed to the subreddits R Linux, R Arch Linux, R Command Line, and a few others. I signed up at the Arch forums. I was wondering if you would have any other recommendations, such as YouTube channels to watch and or websites, I guess for more information about using the command line and specifically Arch Linux. Well, to be honest, it looks like you've got some pretty good places to get information. I mean, you're already on, if you're interested in learning more about Arch, you're on the Arch forums, and of course you're reading the Arch wiki, and you're on the Arch subreddit, the Arch Linux subreddit. I'm not sure what, there's no better places to get more information on Arch than those. You should hang out in their IRC support channels if you want to maybe help people, get their Arch Linux installed, answer support questions on Arch. That would give you even better knowledge of Arch Linux if you were helping others, in their support request about Arch Linux. So that might be something. Maybe help out with the IRC support channel for Arch Linux over on the Freenode network. So you're already on the Arch Linux subreddit. Yeah, that's probably the best place other than the Arch forums, to discuss Arch. You mentioned you were already on the R Linux subreddit. This is the big Linux subreddit. Yeah, I hang out on R Linux a lot. Good place. You mentioned you were already subscribed to R Command Line. Good place for learning command line utilities and curses utilities. And here's another suggestion. You may or may not be subscribed to this. If you're not, R Linux Admin is another good place. Even if you're not into Linux admin work, I'm not a sysadmin myself, but sometimes you get some pretty great nuggets of information here. Some real good, useful command line tips at R Linux Admin. And you asked me about YouTube channels to check out for Arch related stuff and command line related stuff. Well, if you go to my channel and you click on channels, you will see everybody that I am subscribed to, as far as all the Linux and tech channels that I'm subscribed to. They're all Linux and tech related. everybody here. And there's a lot of really good stuff in here. If you're looking for more advanced stuff, I think I'm subscribed to like 80 or 90 different people, but just some that jump out to me right away. Tutorial Linux is great. If you're looking for security related stuff, Quids is fantastic. Arch related stuff, you know what, Eric Dubois, I mean, it's Arco Linux, but might want to check out some of what he does, command line and terminal based application stuff. Got Bletu is fantastic. If you're interested at all in things like Gentoo or Linux from scratch, I know you're talking about Arch, but might be interested in those at some point. Das Gregor, I'm subscribed to him somewhere in here, right here. He's good for stuff like that. Luke Smith is good. He does a lot of terminal-based application and command line stuff. Talks a lot about Vim, bash scripting, and the i3 window manager. He's a big i3 user. Anyway, I'm subscribed to about 90 or so Linux or tech-related channels here. Some of them involve programming. So I would just go through my list here. If any of these people you're not familiar with, maybe click on their channel, see what it's about. So that's just a few suggestions. And before I go, this show was made possible by Ansem, Carlos, Chris, Dylan, Leor, Rob, and Tony. They are the producers of this show. They are my highest tiered patrons over on Patreon. Also brought to you by all those fine ladies and gentlemen, all those names on the screen. They are the supporters of this channel. If you would like to support my work, please consider doing so. You can support me over on Patreon. You will find me at DistroTube over on Patreon. Peace, guys.